Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Windows on the World. Yes, this week's show is called Globalism and the Hive Mind. There's plenty of hive mind around. Before we start the show, I wanted to mention the chat room. Most people who listen to Windows on the World don't know that there is a chat room that you can get into at 9 p.m. every Sunday. It's open before 9, actually, so you can check in whenever you want, as long as the chat's open. And it's on the Windows on the World live page. Now, some people still listen to us on Spreaker, which is fine, but the comments on Spreaker don't really get to me. So if you want to actually interact with the global community, get into the chat room and just chat with the people there, because we need more people using that. So that's great. Let's get on with the show. Now, it seems that the meek have been disinherited from the earth, and the hive minds of the consensus idiocracy have taken over. Now, there's living proof that the human race are rapidly devolving. Now, we do talk about this every week, and it comes into our newsroom every day. It's actually hard to keep up with this epidemic of mental enfeeblement. But tonight, we have a special on all aspects of the growing mind virus, one that even those who promote vaccination have failed to safeguard against. Yes, the mass extinction of the brain cells is upon us. So, listener, are you ready to tell the truth and rebel for life? This is from itv.com to get us going. Extinction Rebellion co-founder used psychedelic medicine for inspiration. Now, we talked about this briefly last week, but this is seriously comedy gold. One of the cow-founders, yeah, more likely, one of the cow-founders, one of the cow-founders of Extinction Rebellion has revealed she began the movement after taking, in inverted commas, psychedelic medicines. And what movement is she talking about? Bowel movement? Well, let's carry on and see. Gail Bradbrook, it says here, a molecular biologist, said she prayed in a deep way. Well, I can't imagine her doing anything or saying anything that was not entirely superficial, actually. But while taking the substances on a retreat, it goes on, she told a BBC documentary maker that her prayer was answered within a month with Extinction Rebellion. I've always been interested in how things change, in social change, she told the documentary. Well, she is a trained change agent. There are hundreds of thousands of these clones everywhere, all trained up and ready to repeat. She carried on, I was involved in the animal rights movement as a young woman. I've been involved in thinking about gender and issues around racism and so on. So the identitarian hive mind kicks in. Nothing new to see here. She says, I've been focused on trying to start civil disobedience since 2010. And I've tried, well, why don't she just do it then? You know what I mean? I've tried many things and they didn't work. So I went on a retreat and prayed in a deep way with some psychedelic medicines. It was a really intense experience. And I actually prayed for what I called the codes of social change. Can you believe this? I thought there must be something I don't understand. Yeah, like everything. And within a month, my prayer was literally answered. Well, is it a coincidence that the codes of social change she was given were exactly the same as those of the UN and the World Bank? Is that a coincidence? I think it probably is. The same route she took was a concept brought about by Maurice Strong and his New Age Gaia religion, which was brought into the UN by General Secretary Robert Mueller in 1974. Did you know that, folks? Well, you will do. Or you would do if you listen to our shows, because we talk about this stuff quite a lot. And it was, of course, Evelyn de Rothschild, and brought to the UN and world leaders in 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit. I talked about all this on Richie Allen's show earlier this week, and there's a link to that interview conversation with Richie on the website. And I put in quite a lot of this stuff. And this idea from the Rio Earth Summit, the thing which Gail Bradbrook has been mentored into, is called the lostness of the mind. Yeah, really, it was called the Fourth World Wilderness. To engage the public into the Gaia religion, saving the earth was the new cover story to take all assets and control all people through a new technocratic system, which would become part of all policy of all governments through one super agency. Yes, the United Nations, through the World Bank, and with its own lobbying group, the IPCC, that was created, that came out of it. And this was also talked about in a document called Our Common Future, that they needed an overall super agency through the UN, which is now obviously known as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and more on them later. And it was to implement global policy. One of the ways it was to be enforced was through drugs and the wilderness of the mind, Gail. So you are part of the programme. You're part of the hive mind. Meaning, of course, the wilderness of the mind, no boundaries in the mind. And outside the mind, no countries, no thoughts, and one world government feeding a disempowered hive mind, a bit like Gail's. ER is just the brainchild of globalism. To set up a globalist-backed but apparently anti-globalist movement to pressure governments through the UN Global Action Plan, which is exactly what they're doing. So Gail Bradbrook, it sounds a little bit like social engineering. Or let's take the other side of the coin, demonic possession through drugs. To me, in fact, it fits both of these things perfectly because I've researched all of it. Very interesting stuff, that, because when you look at these empty shells, people like Gail Bradbrook and Roger Hallam, people who've never had a thought in their entire lives, how come these two complete idiots are now at the centre of this global emergency, which is being enforced on everyone on the planet? Through, of course, the master yachtswoman, Greta Thunberg, whose boat actually used to be called the Mazilia. This is the boat she's on. The Mazilia is called now, I think. And it used to be called, guess what, in its racing days? The Evelinda Rothschild. You couldn't make it up. Check Wikipedia. Well, you know it's true. I don't usually say check Wikipedia, but it is on there. Wikipedia have been spreading nasty rumours about me for years, actually. And we're going to get onto that in a future show. Oh, yes. Dr. Bradbrook described how it started, this is Extinction Rebellion, with around 12 people in her house. Now, how stupid can you be, right? So they've got this globalist-backed puppet show, and it started with 12 people in my front room when we all took psychedelic medicine. I mean, this is delusion. This is unbelievable. But funny thing is, yeah, it's always 12. And the 12 hide the 13th, which is Freemasonry, right? The real power, which is not actually that well hidden, but well hidden enough as the public are distracted with this sort of street theatre of Gail, Roger and their well-funded circus operations. So when you think about it, it also fits into the idea of occult Freemasonry for all you conspiracy theorists out there. But she carries on. We know we've got about 100,000 people on the database in the UK. Oh yeah, the database. And where's that database available? Well, it's available to anybody, any agency or any government body that wants to look at it, isn't it, Gail? And we reach about 1 million people with social media, she said. We've got 130 groups across the UK. We're in 59 countries and it's growing all the time. Now, does this sound like some kind of infiltration group that's backed by globalist power? It does a bit, doesn't it? Yes, thanks to being supported by all media and given access to all media at all times and being in concert with the Global Action Plan and the cover story of saving the planet. This is what it's all about. The movement, it says, has 3 demands for the UK government: to declare a climate and ecological emergency, to halt biodiversity loss and reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2025, and to create and be led by the decisions of a citizens' assembly on climate and ecological justice. Yes, the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, well, hang on a minute, they're the same. That's synchronicity, isn't it? Isn't that amazing? Is it a parallel universe in Gail's minute but highly active brain? I don't know. It must be the psychedelics working in parallel universes that brought it all together. Well, in the lostness of the mind, that's exactly what it is. So, during the documentary, it says cameras were allowed into an Extinction Rebellion meeting in Stroud. What do you mean they were allowed? These idiots would do anything to be on telly. A number of those taking part in the meeting are seen holding each other and crying. Well, we are in an emergency. It's taking a while to get going, admittedly, but give it a chance. So Simon Branwell, another co-founder, told the BBC, depending on the group, we'll have prayers. We'll have a lot of Christians and Quakers involved in Extinction Rebellion. Isn't that interesting? Because the Quakers are very involved in a lot of these globalist projects and always have been because, of course, they are a highly Freemasonic organisation. Idiocracy, though, crosses all boundaries these days. It's called, guess what? Diversity training. So let's carry on with this anyway. Sometimes it says we'll have a prayer or a small ceremony, or sometimes we'll have what we call an intentioning, just a way of like focusing ourselves, just a grounding or an acknowledgement around the room. As long as we keep the circle and don't let any facts in, we'll be okay. Everybody hold hands and keep facts out, okay? So, yeah, hi, of course, let's get into the circle. The ER circle. Now, my name's Roger, and I'm a lost climatard. Hi, my name's Gail, and I'm a drugged out corpse, a climatard, and a change agent. That's two things up on you, Roger. Well, actually, Gail, I'm a failed farmer as well. Oh, okay. It carries on. In that vulnerability, as it were, there's also a great strength, and there's great cohesion, and there's great community, which is something else that a lot of people are missing in this day and age. Are you missing out on great cohesion and great community? Well, you could do some yoga on Westminster Bridge, or you could have a die-in at your local Waitrose. What's stopping you? I can't wait to join their community, though. I'm really missing out. Mr. Bramwell, this is Simon Bramwell, the ex-partner of Dr. Bradbrook. I mean, calling her Dr. Bradbrook really does give her a lot more credibility than she deserves, spoke about protests in Bristol that blocked a main route leading to the M32. One man previously told how he was unable to be at his father's bedside when he died because of the blocked traffic. But grieving for the weather and the ever so obvious climate emergency is bigger than just one person. It's all of us, the Hive Mind Collective. Whose weather? Our weather. Exactly. Mr. Bramwell told the BBC, my mum is quite ill. Oh, this is what these narcissists do. So they get hit with something really serious like that. Like, yeah, due to the fact that you blocked the road, I didn't get to the hospital in time to see my father dying. So then what he has to do is bring it back to him and make sure it's all about his suffering. So he says, my mum is quite ill. She's in a lot of pain. She's disabled. I know how I'd feel if I didn't make it to her bedside for her death, and I can't communicate with any degree of real depth of how sorry I am it happened. You fake, phony, lying piece of never mind. That's right. You can't communicate anything of any depth or even anything. That's the thing about these people. They are a depth-free zone. He said he wasn't present that day, but highlighted that thousands of people are dying from air pollution. See how they always reverse it? So wait a minute. He's lied now and said thousands of people are dying from air pollution. Right? Now where are these people dying from air pollution? People die from respiratory diseases. Yes, they do. Often to do with smoking or lung disease. That is a fact. And it's also known that these cannot be attributed to pollution in the UK, as the relevant authorities will tell you, Mr. Bramwell. So do some research and get out of your hive mind, get out of your little psychedelic experiences and your die-ins and start critically thinking. No, I don't think you're going to do that though, are you? But yeah, don't let that get in the way of a good die-in at Waitrose or a yoga session to hold up the traffic. But Dr. Bradbrook insisted it is only by causing disruption that people will have a conversation about an issue. Now, wait a minute. Maybe your communication skills are a bit lacking, but I've never had that problem. If you are articulate and have facts, people will listen. But if you are inarticulate with no facts, then the only way to get attention is to throw tantrums. This is a well-known tactic, isn't it? So in order to talk about an issue, she has to do something disruptive. And this is, guess what? Saul Alinsky Rules for Radicals. It's a method of training which came out of the Big Society. Look it up in our previous shows. Big Society Change Agents, which is what Gail is. She's a change agent, advocating social change. But if you are articulate, yeah, why would you need to be doing this? But this Saul Alinsky method It infects all public office in the UK now, so do look it up. With a face destined for a life of dull administration, Gail must think she is hallucinating about the parallel worlds of the UN and her globalist-backed puppet show. Interesting, isn't it? So when we hear that one of the co-founders of Extinction Rebellion has revealed, wait a minute, where am I? About after taking psychedelic medicine, she's revealing taking psychedelic medicine. This is literally what was predicted by globalists and world leaders in 1992. And Bradbrook and Hallam are the lost empty vessels who have been filled with New World propaganda and reinforcing the New World system, as we said last week. Why did they choose these two idiots? Well, I think that the outcome here speaks for itself. It's worked, hasn't it? Well, carrying on with this week's clown show, the suspending of Parliament was criticised by Jeremy Corbyn as a smash and grab raid on democracy. Well, actually, it is democracy, but that word has no meaning in the post-truth world. But Corbyn has proved his ineptitude so many times that he might as well just vacate his own mind for good, as most of it has already moved out. I don't know whether you've noticed, everybody. But Per in Sweden made this comment: "Go, Boris, go! Every arsehole in the country is up in arms over this, with the arsehole in chief, Burkow, and the arseholes of Edinburgh also following. Even Corbyn has been spewing his own brand of diarrhea about this. That's the same Greta-hugging democratic socialist who wants to get rid of Lords in favour of a Swedish-style single-chamber parliament. Per knows all about Sweden because he lives there. He says the whole establishment, left and right, though..." Oh, wait a minute. "Are evidently rattled by Boris's new stunt. That tells me," says Per, "that Boris is doing something right and he's turning to authority, the Queen, not to the democratically appointed rabble of that parliamentary menagerie." Well, I don't know about that. The main problem here is that Parliament will reopen and the subversion and psychological play school will carry on as the common good, as social equity, exhibiting itself as establishment democratic pantomime. But interestingly, I have been sent info on Oxford and Cambridge graduates who are being snapped up as subversives. Now, who would ever have thought it? We all know that Cambridge was the traditional recruiting ground for compromised spies and subversives. But now, useful idiots trained into being agents of the new technocratic police state come from combined Oxbridge candidates. I've heard this quite a lot recently. Someone was telling me that people they knew were acting as these sort of lobbyists for groups as soon as they come out of Oxford and Cambridge. Mainly Cambridge, but now Oxford also. So we all know that Cambridge was this traditional recruiting ground for spies going back to the 60s, but I have found quite a few of them. And many these days are lobbying for climate justice. Who'd have thought? The usual communitarian communistic rollout of monoculture and no ideas for all, with mechanical efficiency coming out of these two elite universities. So let's have a look. On the climate front, we have the Oxford Climate Society. Right? Have you ever heard of this, folks? Well, you might do if you are in Oxford University, but probably not outside it. The Oxford Climate Society is a university of Oxford society dedicated to developing informed climate leaders. Useful idiots are being trained at Oxford, ladies and gentlemen. They're taught to not critically think, which is why we now have people like Gail and Roger being championed by the United Nations. It's a brainwashing programme. But what happened to debate? The non-science is settled. Critical thinking is over. These people will be great for global governance. It says, our membership extends from students to professionals and the general public, welcoming all levels of interest and experience. It doesn't matter what interest and experience you have, you're going to be mentored into the hive mind. Yes, there's a climate emergency. So it's an outreach of infiltration of minds. It says we connect like-minded individuals into the hive mind. Yes, educate the climate leaders of the future. We were talking about this last week, weren't we? All these change agent groups basically creating future leaders, which is what the World Global Summit was all about in Dubai earlier this year. Look at our show from last week about all that. We covered it in some detail. But what's a climate leader? Well, a climate leader is a repeater of lies for the United Nations. Oh, I see. Yeah. You couldn't make it up, though, but it's an indoctrination change agent who is ready for social entrepreneurship, which is why I've been told that all of these people leaving Oxford and Cambridge are becoming lobbyists. It's quite fascinating, isn't it? Because these jobs are sort of ready-made, and these people will be tailor-made future leaders. You see how it all works? It all is one streamlined procession into the hive mind. It says we take action on emission reductions in Oxford and provide platforms for academic and artistic engagement with climate change through our publications. So Extinction Rebellion recruitment through the highest level of state education. Well, whatever next? It says what we do. We organise free weekly events with world-leading speakers on the biggest issues in climate science. No, the biggest issues in climate propaganda, politics, economics, campaigning and more. Campaigning, very interesting. So they invite all of their change agents in. And basically, this is like a conveyor belt for change agents. So just the believers in the UN conspiracy theories and climate models, which we will incidentally be looking into later in the show. So they say they organised the Oxford School of Climate Change, an 8-week seminar series designed for all those who care deeply. Oh, you've got to care about it. You've really got to care deeply and get upset. You've got to be so upset you want to do yoga on Westminster Bridge. You've got to be so upset that you want to lie down in Waitrose. That's how upset you've got to be. They care deeply about preventing climate breakdown. Yeah, I try every day. I don't know about you, but I'm really fighting hard to prevent climate breakdown. You know, it's the first thing on my mind as soon as I get up. And finding answers to the most pressing questions in climate policy and science. Climate policy first, you see. The most pressing questions in climate policy and science. Whose science? Our science, exactly. We organise our student research showcase where students from all disciplines and academic stages can exhibit or speak about an environmental project that they have been involved with, followed by a drinks reception in our exhibition space. As long as they repeat the implausible and the untrue, they'll be all right. They publish Anthroposphere, the Oxford Climate Journal, and it's biannual. They publish 2 degrees, the OCS Zine. This is all, it's like a new form of language, isn't it? They run a popular blog featuring contributions from students across the university, and they campaign for concrete action to reduce the university's contribution to climate change, including through the University of Oxford Carbon Innovation Programme. They've got it all worked out, haven't they? Could Oxford University then become carbon neutral? Could it please be the epicentre of the mass extinction? No, thought not. It says they learn, connect and act. Yeah, well, there you go. Don't send your children to Oxford and Cambridge, ladies and gentlemen. It will do them no good at all. How do I know this? I've met the fallout. In other news this week, alternative Epstein panto. Right, now, it's already well known that CCTV footage disappears when necessary, even if the cameras are recording. Have you noticed this? So the Epstein pantomime backs up what most people already knew. But the big question is, why do even the most independent-sounding press keep saying he's dead? Now, this is from an article by Mark Hosenball, and it says, FBI studies 2 broken cameras outside cell where Epstein died. I mean, how carefully are they going to study them, you know? Well, are they going to say that, no, they're not working, or yes, they are? I mean, it's quite simple, really, isn't it? 2 cameras that malfunctioned. Oh, they malfunctioned, did they, outside the jail cell? Have you ever known just 2 cameras to malfunction when they joined up to the CCTV? How can 2 just simply go wrong? You know, it's very odd, isn't it? 2 cameras that malfunctioned outside the jail cell where financier Jeffrey Epstein died have been sent to an FBI crime lab for examination. What could possibly go wrong here, I wonder? A law enforcement source told Reuters, I should say sold Reuters, the 2 cameras were within view of the Manhattan jail cell where he was found dead, allegedly. It's on August the 10th. A source earlier told Reuters 2 jail guards failed to follow a procedure overnight to make separate checks on all prisoners every 30 minutes. Well, you can understand that they probably don't do that in reality, you know. Well, look on the bright side. What about the 7/7 London tube and bus bombings in 2005? Do you remember that? Israeli security company Verint, who ran the cameras, managed to hold back all the footage without anyone in government calling them out on it. So this Epstein panto is so easy in comparison. They just said the cameras on the underground weren't working. For anybody who doesn't know about 7/7, it was Britain's 9/11. It was 52 people were killed on underground trains and on a bus. And it was all very interestingly revealed in a book called Terror on the Tube by Dr. N. Colostrum. Take a look at that. It's one of his better works. But it says there were only 2 cameras that malfunctioned. Well, wait a minute. That really is just a coincidence, and anyone who says otherwise must think that Elvis is alive and well and singing in a pub on Margate seafront. Well, actually, he is, and also in pubs all over the country. So if anyone thinks there was one Epstein, think about how many Elvises there are. No, just think about it, The AFD party we're going to get onto now. We're going to get onto the far right part of the show. We're going to get onto the far right bit now. The AFD party in Germany, which is basically an anti-mass immigration party, has been derided by the Marxist extreme leftist media. So we have to bring it all down to left and right, you see. And as we have described, they are both playing their part in creating the new synthesis, which is called totalitarianism. The new totalitarianism. It says, well, AFD might win 2 German state elections, Saxony and Brandenburg. Now, it was interesting, actually, because when Merkel turned up in Saxony, she got booed, didn't she? That was a couple of years ago. This is on September the 1st, right? It's by Mike Shedlock who wrote this. The anti-immigration, anti-Euro AFD party took the lead in Brandenburg in 3 of the last 5 polls in Brandenburg and is within striking distance in Saxony. All eyes are on Eastern Germany as elections take place in Saxony and Brandenburg on Sunday, September the 1st. And for the first time in German history, the Alternative for Germany, which is the AFD, could win in a state elections and make it extremely difficult for the established parties to form a government. Now, Per in Sweden added to this. He said, it's interesting that poll data ahead of Sunday's elections have been kind of saying this, that basically that what we've got here is a possibility of them getting even more seats in Parliament. Now, I think they had seats in 2017, they got about 12%. So this is interesting, actually. And it's rather unfortunate that what's going to happen is that as people realise what the UN Migration Compact is all about and the destruction of nations under the UN Global Action Plan, that everything is going to be deemed far right, which is why I'm covering this story. Well, anything centre of a communist dictator is extreme right to the BBC, of course. But it says, since the vote, Alexander Gauland has talked of fighting an invasion of foreigners. Now, this was in 2017, right? Oh, yeah, I'm just going back to this article. This was actually the original quote from the BBC. And their campaign openly focused on Islam and migration. AFD sees Islam as alien to German society. Well, it is really, isn't it? If you're talking about a Christian country, then Islam would be alien to it. But you can't say that because of the hive mind consensus fake reality that we're being mentored into. Because facts cannot trump feelings and beliefs in the post-truth world. Can anyone see anything Nazi there, though? The BBC keep calling these people Nazis. And the BBC communitarian communists are once again using reversal. That's all it is, really. So the synthesis of left and right is the big society that came out in 2010 under David Cameron. And this, what we're seeing now is the results of all that with people like Gail Bradbrook and Roger Hallam. They are a product of the big society. But basically, the change you want to see but haven't been told how to see it yet, that's the big society. But get yourself some diversity training and you will literally never be the same again. So let's get on to what really matters. Trivia and self-identity. Well, I hope you're all enjoying the climate emergency and diversity in your vibrant communities, and I hope you're getting some social equity and social justice. I hope you're fighting hate and working towards a more tolerant and inclusive society. Are you? Is that what you're doing out there? I'm so glad. But the social engineering programme has reached the absolute peak in propaganda, as it is in danger of imploding because it's not very popular either. The public comments on the NGOs and lobbying groups promoting diversity in a hive mind of state speak are generally negative. Have you noticed this? When people like Hope Not Hate and all these NGOs and action groups put up their paid for adverts on things like Facebook, there's usually a whole heap of negative comments and one or two people trying to control the narrative and failing miserably. So yeah, it's interesting that the community hub of beyond politically correct police state monothought is emptying, apart from those on the brainwashing gravy train in the public sector. So it's only the people who are actually supported by this who are really supporting it, which is interesting. And as diversity goes, it doesn't get more oppressive and totalitarian than the Diversity Trust. Have a look at this, boys and girls. The Diversity Trust. Have you heard of it? Well, take a look, read it and weep. I've been watching some of their videos. Now, this is funny, right? Because they're just concentrating on a few transgender men in old people's homes. And when I look at these videos, and if you're of a certain age like me, you can't look at them without thinking of Les Dawson and Roy Kinnear talking about the women's problems. Just look at these videos. They're extremely funny, and give them a few more views because they've only had 34 views so far. Right? Got Moneypenny in the background here, and she's monitoring the chat room for subversives and trying to find some. How many transgender men dressed as women are there in old people's homes? I mean, how many old people's homes have you been to? All right, sometimes you see old ladies that look like old men and old men that look like old ladies, but they're not transgender, are they? Well, they've found them, right? And they've even made a few films, which you can see on their YouTube channel. Now, the cheek of it all, right, is they got funding to make these films, which I could have done in about 2 minutes. It's just not fair, you know. There's no diversity left in the world. So the Diversity Trust have made these several videos interviewing transgender OAPs. They must exist because they came up with this remarkable insight. Now, one of them, right, this is absolute comedy, right, and it's not politically correct. So if you've got your PC diversity empowerment ears on, then switch off for a minute. Well, this elderly man who's allegedly transgendered, he said, what if an elderly man who was transgendered gets Alzheimer's and forgets he's transgendered? Now, this was a serious comment, right? And this was brought up as a serious point by one of the Diversity Trust transgender OAPs. Now, this is just incredible, isn't it? I would say that this would be a minor issue when you consider the havoc wreaked around people with Alzheimer's. And I've had personal experience of this. And it's really horrendous and very upsetting, the things that people with Alzheimer's get up to, like leaving the gas on, you know, defecating on unusual and very inconvenient places, shouting and screaming at their closest relatives and causing huge distress to everyone around them. I mean, I don't think that some person with Alzheimer's going, I can't remember transgendering, you know. Well, yeah, but forget about that. You've just crapped yourself, you know. It's just like, this is just insanity, but really, really funny, yeah? But to take on a lighter note, I remember when the trad jazz performer George Melly, he started to develop Alzheimer's, and he said in a lucid moment that as a surrealist, he was really enjoying it. All right, I shouldn't be laughing at this, but we've got to have some light relief, haven't we, in the global hive mind? But in reality, this comment really gets to the core of the self-referencing narcissism encouraged around identity groups. It's all about me and the way the world sees me, and more importantly, the way I see myself. That's all of these videos. That's all about that. It's not about the effect my behaviour has anyone around me. Do you see what I mean? Now, this is what comes across in all these videos. This comment really highlighted the narcissism and self-referencing encouraged by the Diversity Trust, who are setting up minorities to demand rights over the majority through what is way beyond political correctness and is a demand upon everyone outside a self-appointed group to step into line with their demands. This is a totalitarian demand system that they've set up. Yes, their demands. Do I have any such rights, me? Do you? Only if you are part of a politically promoted identity group. Otherwise, you don't have any rights. And that is what is the truth of the matter here. In other words, the identity group are at war with everyone outside their group and constantly looking for anything which they can attach to their identity to attack anyone who questions anything they say or do. Have a look at those videos and see if you disagree with my point. It'd be very interesting if you do. I'd like to debate on that. A clever psychological tool is this, and useful to further disempower public opinion and control the narrative. So let's look at this organisation behind such social engineering. This is from their website, the Diversity Trust. What it says on their website as their opener, it says, the Diversity Trust influences social change. Does this sound familiar? Does this sound like Gail Bradbrook and the rest of the hive mind? Yes, it does a bit, doesn't it? The C word, change. The C word is never defined since the big society of 2010, when the agents of change were trained to infiltrate all so-called communities and control the narrative of all public opinion, from fake community groups to fake consultations, all funneling the perceived public opinion into the New World agenda. It says here, this is one of their courses on diversity training. The course is aimed at people who develop and implement strategy. In other words, it's not bottom up, it's top down. So this isn't about engaging with people. This is about training other change agents or mentoring people into being change agents in other organisations. It's a hierarchical system. So the course is aimed at people who develop and implement strategy, commissioners, service managers and operational staff. So they're not interested in the people in the lower pecking order, because they'll just be brought into line by the managers, you see. It will be useful to those working in a wide range of sectors and to a wide range of voluntary and community sector settings. So they're covering everything. This is your local hub, ladies and gentlemen. Totalitarian communitarianism, or as more experienced people would describe it, iron fist communism dressed up as tolerance and inclusion. It says the Diversity Trust works with companies, businesses and organisations on a wide range of projects, yes. But what do they do? What do they really do? In effect, they get into organisations and enforce the agenda of a promoted minority group, a group which isn't actually a group, but an ideology. That's really important. So these are not groups. These are ideologies that are being pushed. They are not minority groups. They're not empowering minority groups. They're empowering ideologies for ideological subversion. In other words, setting up one side against another. Basically, so you get a reaction, so that you have to shut everything down so nobody can say anything. Very simple. But this disempowers the majority so they cannot speak their mind about anything. So they self-police and get increasingly frustrated. Now, what this does, it causes a conflict in the individual and will come to the surface in angry outbursts and self-destructive habits and even addictions caused by internal stress. This is what all this stuff does. This is why there's so much mental illness in society, because people can't express themselves properly. And this will, of course, only happen in those who have a strong moral compass. So it's the people with the strongest morals who are going to be most damaged by this. And their sense of natural justice will really suffer as they're mentored into this hive mind, which is against the natural order of things and their own self. So I think that's a really important point, that this is against the rules of creation. Yeah, it says all this stuff it's about those who develop and implement strategy. It's incredible. But let's look at what their training is all about. You and your organisation are now expected, here we go, there's another demand, you and your organisation, so it doesn't matter whether you're an individual or an organisation, you're expected to make your documents and information accessible for anyone who needs it. Having communication standards and policies will help make this happen. So you get this infiltration group coming into your organisation to take it over. That's basically what happens. Our course will help you develop a plan which delivers these communication requirements. We'll help you organise a strategy to meet the information and communication needs of your clients. So in other words, we're going to come in and we're going to take over your organisation, or we're going to take over your business. That's what they're going to do. So why don't, it says we'll support you in becoming fully competent with your communication standards, which are set by NHS England. Now, this is interesting, isn't it? So why don't NHS England just send you a leaflet? So that's rubbish. So the communication standards set by NHS England are available to everybody, but these people still want to come in to subvert you. The parasitic entity uses diversity as a weapon of psychological warfare. Comply or we will break down your door, or break you down, or come down on you like a ton of bricks. Now, this is the system of communist dictatorships, and it's now in your local city, town or village, as we keep reporting, right? Another of the Diversity Trust's Stasi programs is called Achieving Cultural Competence. Can you believe this? They're telling you how to achieve cultural competence. These are people who are trying to destroy culture, telling you how to achieve cultural competence through their diversity training, which means iron fist monoculture. So the course explores the key themes of, guess what? Equality, diversity and inclusion, just for a change, and focuses on achieving cultural competence. Now, most people who work anywhere will have already achieved cultural competence, right? Because you can't work anywhere and not be culturally competent. You can't interact with people unless you're reasonably culturally competent. You just can't do it. In other words, they might use some common sense. Now, the whole point of interaction is to advance communication, isn't it? Therefore, this is all about interfering with natural communication and bringing in a self-policing policy and social engineering program which stifles all speech. And that's exactly what these people are doing. So this is to control organisations from the top down. It's not about coming in and giving the staff a pep talk. It's the new communitarianism which was announced by David Cameron in 2010, and it's grown like a spider and is even described by its agents as a spider. Yeah, social spider. Look up social spider, community interest companies. Yeah, having a web which encompasses every organisation at every level of public engagement. And as we know, nobody will be left behind. Of course, the Diversity Trust are linked to social entrepreneur news in the US. So they link to a US organisation. So it's a UK organisation, but when you're in the hive mind, you're an internationalist, aren't you? The community organisers and change agents are all out of the same limited but mass-produced mould. All the websites of these change agents are cookie cutters of each other, and all have the same aims to control all public narrative, and they have the cheek to call it vibrant and diverse. The encouraging thing is that these organisations have pretty much zero engagement with the wider world, and they just feed off each other, as we were saying earlier. The problem is that they are used to enforce fake community in your local area, and they've poisoned everywhere and continue to grow and infiltrate anything which they deem to be outside this communitarian programme. Now, here's another infiltration programme called, wait for it, Why Not Change? Let's see what one of their local social entrepreneurs has been up to. Saving a parish hall from being sold to housing developers by turning it into, no, not a pub, not a community centre, a thriving social enterprise and community hub, just for a change. Now, all of them are community hubs. You don't have a community centre anymore. You don't have a local hall. You have a community hub. With a number of new businesses started in 3 months. That's what she was up to, this woman. So basically what she's done, they've found a parish hall that the locals have probably thought, well, we'll try and relocate. This is exactly what happened to my friend's charity. We'll try and relocate. We can't afford to keep the building. They've come in, taken over, and basically turned it into a community hub. I'm going to talk about this a bit more because this is really, really serious. We're going to do another show on it because what happened to a charity in North London and a real community venue you can find in small venues and charities under threat. And it's in Windows on the World Archive. Have a listen to that show because this is what's coming your way, folks. This is what's happening everywhere. And this woman's proud of it, the one on here. And it's the same cookie cutter template everywhere. But basically, this is not the same as a real community venue. It's a hive for change agents and their ideas. I bet local businesses and real local organisations did not get a look in. It says speaking to and running enterprise workshop for schools. That's what these people for change are doing. That's good of a minute. Stasi training programmes to initiate the youth into the social engineering programme. That's all that is. Working with local charities and social enterprises to increase their enterprise capabilities to bring more change agents into the hive mind. Yes, bringing in all narrative controllers and fellow parasites using the divide and rule inclusivity that we all know and, yes, hate. The H word. We want the C word. Change. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that was quite hard work. So we're going to have a bit of weather with, yes, the BBC. We're going to be introducing the BBC. This is Sir David Actorball with Climate Matters. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Climate emergency. I know it's turned out nice again, but worse is to come. My voiceovers clearly say so. Recently I was
lucky enough to share the world stage with the Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg. And now, as an exclusive for BBC Media Action Worldwide, I am able to talk to her elusive sister, Greta Thunberg. So, Greta, what's it like having such a famous younger sister?
It's doing my head in. She keeps telling everyone our house is on fire.
Oh.
It's not true. The emergency services are suing my parents, and the neighbours are furious.
But surely there is a climate emergency.
Greta, my parents keep banging on about it. But the overall picture, even from the IPCC, says it's perfectly normal. And in the bigger picture, we are in a remarkably stable period for weather. And watch out for the grand solar minimum. It's going to get cold.
That's too many words. So are you saying that your sister Greta, the UN, and 97% of scientists are wrong?
No, they are just lying. Greta lies all the time. She just repeats what Mummy and Daddy tell her. You need to look at your sources. You've been sold a pup.
But global temperatures are rising. Our house really is on fire.
Are you some kind of conspiracy theorist?
No, of course not. I work for the BBC. Are you saying your parents would lie about such a thing?
Oh, yes. It's earned them a lot of money. They're actors. They love all the attention, too. They fly all over the world, and I'm stuck in Sweden all the time.
Can't you go anywhere by boat like Greta?
No. My parents just tell me that the sea is full of plastic. So I've got to stay in. Sir David, please stop lying so I can go out. It's not fair. You went to the Glastonbury Festival and I couldn't even get a job there, picking up the plastic bottles that the whales eat. Why can't I ever have any fun? Woe upon me.
Oh dear.
My parents say my carbon footprint is too big. I'm only size 4. Look at the size of your feet. Your carbon footprint is massive. And you leave it up all over the world.
Yes, size 10, yes.
Whoa, upon me greater than Greta.
Oh dear.
And to think that I am the cleverest in the family. Why can't I be a useful idiot? Why can't I get my hair plaited and travel the world? Because I'm a climate change denier. I'm a climate realist. I study real data. I'm the only Thunderbird that isn't a globalist puppet. Do some research. Go check the data yourselves.
Okay.
Helveti Javlar. Out, I say, out.
Oh, I think she's
Go
telling
set
me
your own house on fire.
telling me to go to hell at this point. Well, we seem to have lost Greta. Well, that's it from me, David Attenborough, and this week's climate emergency. Until next week, damn, it's turned out nice again.
Go to hell in Swedish.
Oh, I thought I just did.
I'm going to follow you forever. Climate realists will prevail. Revenge will be mine.
Well, that was David Attenborough there. Well, this is what we've been saying this for years, though, haven't we, really? We're now going to look at something from the Washington Examiner. The Great Failure of the Climate Models. It's by Patrick Michaels and Caleb Stewart Rossiter from August 25th this year. It says computer models of the climate are at the heart of calls to ban the cheap, reliable energy that powers our thriving economy and promotes healthier, longer lives. For decades, these models have projected dramatic warming from small, fossil-fueled increases in atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide with catastrophic consequences. Yet the real-world data aren't cooperating. They show only slight warming, mostly at night and in winter. According to the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, there has been no systematic increase in the frequency of extreme weather events. Well, we've been talking about this for ages. Even Greta Thunberg's sister was saying it there, wasn't she? So, yeah, and the ongoing rise in sea level that began with the end of the Ice Age continues with no great increase in magnitude. In other words, it's not really happening. The consistency of land-based records is obvious in data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Should we trust these computer models of doom? Let's find out by comparing the actual temperatures since 1979, which they do, with what the 32 families of climate models used in the latest UN report on climate science predicted they would be. Now, it refers to here Dr. John Christie's written testimony before the US House of Representatives Committee on Science, Space and Technology. The central element of his December testimony was that climate models are failing miserably at simulating the actual temperature rise in in the Earth's lower atmosphere. Now, scientists don't know the real reason for this, but the real reason for this is to push the climate change agenda. That's the whole point of it, because it's about the World Bank and its taxation scheme from Rio 92 and the Global Action Plan, the one we've been talking about, well, for quite some time and even on this show. It says the models produce about 2.5 times as much warming from human greenhouse gas emissions than has actually been observed by satellites and weather balloons. We've said this the last few weeks, haven't we? There you are, your 2 degrees of fear, ladies and gentlemen. 2.5 degrees of fear for you there, which have just been made up. Atmospheric scientist John Christie developed a global temperatures record of the lower atmosphere using highly accurate satellite soundings. NASA honoured him for this achievement, and he was an author for a previous edition of the UN report. He told a House Science Committee hearing in March 2017 that the UN climate models have failed badly. Christie compared the average model projections since 1979 to the most reliable, those made by satellites and weather balloons, and the result was in the upper levels of the lower atmosphere, the models predicted 7 times as much warming as has actually been observed. Overprediction also occurred at all other levels. Christie recently concluded that on average the projected heating by the models is 3 times what has been observed. Now, this is a critical error, it says here. No, it's not. It's absolute fraud. That's what it is. Getting the tropical climate right is essential to understanding climate worldwide, it says. But most of the atmospheric moisture originates in the tropical ocean, and the difference between surface and upper atmosphere temperature determines how much of the moisture rises into the atmosphere. Now, that's important. Most of the Earth's agriculture is dependent upon the transfer of moisture from the tropics to temperate regions. Now, it says Christie's not looking at surface temperatures as measured by thermometers at weather stations. Instead, he's looking at temperatures measured from calibrated thermistors, measuring heat carried by weather balloons and data from satellites. Why didn't he simply look down here where we all live? Because the records of the surface temperatures have been badly compromised. Globally averaged thermometers show 2 periods of warming since 1900. A half degree from natural causes in the first half of the 20th century, before there was an increase in industrial carbon dioxide that was enough to produce it, and another half degree in the last quarter of the century. The latest UN Science Compendium, it says, asserts that the latter half a degree is at least half man-made, but the thermometer records show that the warming stopped from 2000 to 2014 until they didn't, it says here. In 2 of the 4 global surface series, data were adjusted in 2 ways that wiped out the pause that had been observed. The first adjustment changed how the temperature of the ocean surface is calculated by replacing satellite data with drifting buoys and temperatures in ships' water intake. The size of the ship determines how deep the intake tube is, and the steel ships warm up tremendously under sunny, hot conditions. The buoy temperatures, which are measured by precise electronic thermistors, were adjusted upwards to match the questionable ship data. Getting a bit technical, but I think you get the idea here. Given that the buoy network became more extensive during the pause, that's guaranteed to put some artificial warming into the data. Now, when you also look into the fact that some of these weather stations are now in completely different places than they were originally. In other words, some of them that were in the countryside are now in built-up areas. Some of them are actually set in concrete, which warms them up anyway. And some of them have closed down and don't exist. When you add that to it, it adds even more perspective. Well, basically, it says, even in warm summers, there's plenty of ice over much of the Arctic Ocean. Now, for example, when the sea ice is nearing its annual minimum, it still extends partway down Greenland's east coast. As long as the ice water mix is well stirred like a glass of ice water, the surface temperature stays at the freezing point until the ice melts. So extended land readings over the Arctic Ocean adds non-existent warming to the record. Further, both global and United States data have been frequently adjusted. There is nothing scientifically wrong with adjusting data to correct for changes in the way temperatures are observed and for changes in thermometers, but each serial adjustment has tended to make the early years colder, which increases the warming trend, and that's wildly improbable, it says here. In addition, Thermometers are housed in standardised instrument shelters, which are to be kept a specified shade of white. Shelters in poorer countries are not repainted as often, referring to what I was saying here, and darker stations absorb more of the sun's energy. It's no surprise that poor tropical countries show the largest warming from this effect. All this is to say that the weather balloon and satellite temperatures used in Christie's testimony are the best data we have, and they show that the UN's climate models just aren't ready for prime time, it says here. Now, Patrick Michaels, it says here, was a research professor of environmental sciences at the University of Virginia for 30 years and is the author of the upcoming book, Scientocracy. Caleb Stewart Rossiter, the other author here, taught climate statistics and mathematical modelling at American University. They are currently with the CO2 Coalition in Arlington, Virginia. So those are the voices of truth and reason, ladies and gentlemen. So I hope you've found that interesting and informative. Have we got anything interesting in chat, Moneypenny?
Yes, you've had a few people sending things that you need to look at.
I certainly will.
About the most important one, somebody is asking you, but I'm not sure what they mean by that. They are asking you, Mark, somebody called Martin
Houston, yes.
Martin,
hello, Martin. Yeah.
Mark, can we use this on Sunday, Long Live Radio?
Long Live Radio?
Or long Live Radio, yeah.
What for, as a chat box?
I'm not sure. You ask him and he can respond to you here. You might have meant the Actable.
Oh, I see.
I'm not sure,
oh,
I'm not sure.
Yes, Martin. Martin, you can PM me for more information. Because I can't phone you, Martin, because you're in a foreign jurisdiction, aren't you? Well, you are from this country. It's a foreign jurisdiction that is actually sovereign, called the Isle of Man. Did you know that I can't phone you on my cell phone? Yeah, I can phone Germany. Isn't that strange? All right, then. Anything else in there?
Yeah, the comedy sketch, he means, yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right, then, Martin. That's great. We're going to do a whole series of those, and it's going to get more and more refined and more outrageous. Yeah, absolutely.
It's funnier and funnier.
It gets funnier and funnier as it goes on. We're just priming you here.
And then he sent you some really good stuff that you need to watch yourself.
That's great. Thanks for that, Martin. And everyone who is listening out there and who listens to the show afterwards, do join us in the chat box on Sunday, because it is quite fun and you can have sort of instantaneous feedback, which is great. And also I've been contacted this week by Marcus in Germany, who has been listening to the show, and I love to share information with him. He's a real eco-activist in the real sense, and very worried about the infiltration of the Green Movement. And of course, we've got Sen in Bulgaria, Roy in the Philippines, and people all over the place who are sending me stuff which I can't bring to mind at the moment. We have so many people sending in so much information, and we are, ladies and gentlemen, going to the coldest parts of the world with the bigger picture. Yes, we're going up to Scotland soon.
I saw the solar minimum then, not yet.
That's right. Yeah, it's always the solar minimum in Glasgow, isn't it? All right then. So that's it for this week's show, and we'll be back next week. There's lots of stuff coming in, and keep sending stuff in because the information is great. Listen to that show I did with Richie Allen as well. That's on the website, and do go to the website and check the front page for the shows that we're doing in your area. We'll be announcing them all again next week, but everything we're doing is on the front page of windowsontheworld.net. So that's it from me. Thanks a lot to everybody, and Moneypenny in chat. We'll see you all next week on Windows on the World. Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net.